Hi there, and welcome to Real Talk in ELT, a podcast about the reality of teaching English. I'm your host, Kelly Pennington. Thank you for joining me today. Okay, so today we're going to be looking at the issue of students' progress and when we think that they're not making any progress. So the first thing that I would recommend doing is diagnosing the problem. Is this something that is related to specific skills or language systems? And if so, which ones? And of course, that could be interlapping. So we can have issues in the 4 skills: reading, listening, speaking, or writing, or one of the systems, so vocabulary, grammar, discourse, or phonology. Once you kind of determine what the issue is, why there's a problem, and in which systems or skills the student is having problems in, define whether it's an error, a slip, a mistake. Is the student having problems in the language because they don't know something? Or are they testing things out and they're not completely competent in being able to apply specific rules or ideas to the language? Or do they simply make the slip because they're tired after work, or because they're having some sort of social issues and they're not 100% focused on what they're doing in the lesson? So kind of diagnosing that problem and digging deeper into why this is happening and what areas it's affecting for them. Also be aware of interlanguage. So there's always this transition period where the students are learning something and then applying it naturally in their language. That might be an issue. And of course, through second language acquisition and all of the research done in it, we know that there is going to be this awkward transition period where students know things but are kind of testing it out or maybe overgeneralizing some rules, and it's part of their process in being able to produce fluent and accurate language. So just kind of being aware of what's happening and what's going on. So diagnosing the problem. Then, of course, we need to come up with a plan, and to have a plan that both the student and the teacher agree upon. So it's something that you need to recognize and inform them that you see that there is an issue, but that you have come up with, this course of action, and that they agree upon the course of action. So explaining to them the consequences of whatever progress hindering issue is happening with them. So listen, I see that you're not making progress here. I've identified the problem, and I would like your collaboration to move forward so we can really get you to where you need to be. And again, this should be collaborative because the students should be informed of problems that they're having with the language, but also how the teacher can help them get to where they need to be. With that in mind, we need to be setting realistic goals. We need to be setting SMART goals. And this is SMART is an acronym, and it's a terminology that's been kind of floating around both in the business world and in ESL now. So to have a SMART goal, it needs to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. Specific because you can't just say, well, you need to improve your listening. Well, what kind of listening do they need to improve? And in what way? In what scenarios? What's the issues there? So it needs to be very specific. It needs to be measurable. So it needs to be something that you can show a starting point and an ending point. And so you can show that progress to that student, because that will affect their motivation in resolving that issue. It needs to be attainable because it can't be this far-fetched, goal of becoming a C2 proficient language speaker after 2 months of studying. That's just not realistic at all. It needs to be relevant. And this issue of relevance is, I think, very important for the students because they see the connection and they see why this is important for their progress in the future. And of course, it needs to be time-bound. And this is where your language expertise as a teacher will come into play, where you can give a specification on what they should be doing, the SMAR part of the SMART, right? The specific, measurable, attainable, and relevant. But then based on your experience and based on your knowledge, you need to give the student an accurate time and how long it's really going to take to achieve that goal. Some things are relatively quick and some things need to show progression over time. And so it's something that you base off of your experience and your knowledge, and it needs to be negotiated with the student because our assumption is that they're going to be doing some sort of work to reach that goal. But if they're not collaborating and they're not putting in the work, then that time frame is going to be moved again and again based on the amount of effort that they put into achieving that goal. And finally, I would like to point out an idea that I'm very passionate about and that I deal with and try to research with my students is feedback and self-efficacy. So for those of you who don't know what self-efficacy is, it refers to a person's belief in what he or she has the capacity to do to perform tasks and to achieve things. So it reflects the confidence in the language classroom. It reflects the confidence of the students and in their ability to control their motivation, their behavior, and ultimately their success in producing language. And the reason that I'm so passionate about it is because I have a lot of students that come to me with very low self-efficacy, and I find it to be a common problem, and they have reduced expectations of what is possible based on past experiences and possibly traumas. And so when we're thinking about feedback in the language classroom, we need to think about effective feedback that promotes the idea of self-efficacy. And there's 5 based on Bandura, who has published books and papers and lots of things in this area from starting in the 1970s up until the latest, I think, was 1997. There are 5 categories that can contribute to self-efficacy. And when a student has higher self-efficacy, they're more motivated to do things. They are more resilient in the face of challenges. They're more likely to try to communicate in different ways, and they're trying to perform at a higher level. There's a million benefits to higher self-efficacy, and unfortunately it hasn't really been studied extensively in the language learning community, but it has been studied extensively in both sports performance and business performance. And all of the ideas do translate into the language classroom. So the 5 pillars of self-efficacy that contribute to higher self-efficacy. The first one is performance experience. So if a student has a previous experience that they were able to perform a task or a communicative task and it was successful, it improves their self-efficacy. And if they don't perform the task effectively, then it lowers their self-efficacy. So in terms of language teaching, we need to stop focusing so much on the details sometimes, and we need to start focusing on, were they able to communicate? Were they able to complete the task? Other corrections to errors and mistakes and all of that good stuff, we can do that maybe a delayed feedback or in a different form, but sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes we need to just focus on, were they successful in completing the task? Because if they were, then they're more likely to take a risk in future classes. There's also pillar number 2, vicarious experience. So by observing experience or modeling experiences after others, you can improve a student's self-efficacy. So a great way to do this is having maybe some stronger students in the classroom perform the task, and by using that model, by having that vicarious experience, students can have an improvement in their self-efficacy, and therefore they will be more likely to attempt doing those types of communicative tasks. There's social persuasion, which helps with coaching and feedback. So being cognizant of the type of feedback that you're giving and what type of areas you're focusing on in that feedback. And also giving some coaching. I know coaching is like it's turned into this word that everybody uses, and I don't think it has a great connotation nowadays, but coaching the student to be able to complete the communicative task or to do whatever task that they're supposed to do in the language classroom will help them and improve their self-efficacy. Imaginal experience. So there is value in students visualizing future performances and future successes. So this, I think, is really connected to our thinking time. So if you give the students thinking time and have them run through a task and visualize the task in their head, you can improve their self-efficacy and their motivation, and then hopefully improve their successful completion of those tasks in the language classroom. And finally, there's emotional and physical states. So these also play a major part in the language classroom, and it has everything to do with affect. So we know that negative affective filters can cause lower performance in students. And so by creating a classroom that is inclusive and welcoming and encouraging of language learning, we can improve the self-efficacy of the student and therefore improve their motivation and improve their motivation in trying and improve their confidence in attempting things that might be uncomfortable and approaching tasks and situations that they may or may not have the skills, but they are willing to try and take a risk. So, in summary, if you are having students that are having trouble with progress and they're not making any progress in the classroom, I would encourage you to stop, diagnose the problem. If it's a language problem, then that's something that we can deal with. And if it's something that comes to organization and time management, it's also something that you can help the students with. Come up with a plan with them, set realistic and smart goals, and be cognizant of your feedback and how it affects the self-efficacy of the student. And possibly try a tip from one of the 5 pillars of self-efficacy. I hope this episode has been helpful for anyone who has students that struggle with not making progress. Thank you so much for joining me this week, and I will be back next episode with some real talk on Instagram teachers, the good, the bad, and the ugliness of social media. Ready to join the conversation? Head on over to Instagram at Real Talk in ELT Podcast or on @EnglishWithKelly and send me a message. That's it for me. Take care of yourself, your health, your vibe, and your tribe. Until next time.